Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics, although just one guy this week. Mike's still a little bit busy, but kind of wanted to go into a topic that I thought was important, and that is why I believe we still need superheroes. And more to that point, I think why we need comic books in particular. And so, if you'll indulge me, I'll kind of go through a story of the first comic book that I ever read. Now, I had owned comic books when I was a kid for years, but most of the time, when I looked at them, it was just the cool pictures that were in there, the art. I didn't really read the stories. It was cool to see Silver Surfer floating through space, or Wolverine punching a guy in a bar fight, or Batman driving the Batmobile through Gotham, even something iconic like Superman's death in Superman 75. I had a ton of comics, and I stack of them, kind of like I do now, but I never really read the plots. I saw the words here and there, but I mainly looked at it for the pictures and the cool art and the heroes doing awesome things. It's just what I valued out of it. And I remember in July of 1998, I was about 10 years old. I remember we went to the grocery store, the small little Kroger where we lived at the time in Colorado. And my mom was shopping and she let me and my brothers go to the magazine aisle and look around there. And I remember flipping open a copy of Amazing Spider Man 436. Not a memorable issue for a lot of people. 436th issue of Spider-Man. It's a fairly invaluable comic nowadays, but I will only remember it as the first comic book that I truly read. Tom DeFalco wrote it. Joe Bennett was on the art. I didn't know that at the time, but I know it now. I remember reading this story. It was just a Spider-Man adventure. He was fighting a guy named the Black Tarantula. I'd never seen the Black Tarantula before. Spider-Man, I'd seen the cartoon, but to be honest, I had a few of his comics, but I couldn't tell you what the plot was, who was going, where it had led to this, anything like that. And yet I remember this issue. I remember reading it. I remember seeing what was in the issue. And the issue, Black Tarantula is going after this wife, his ex-wife and his kid, and he is tearing through everybody. There's these huge robots, and he's ripping them to pieces and throwing people away. There's an army of guys attacking him on their side, and he's just dismantling everybody. And then there's one guy standing in front of him, and that's the Amazing Spider-Man. And Peter is getting his butt handed to him this year because Tarantula is huge. Black Tarantula towers over Spidey. He looks like a child compared to Black Tarantula. He's slamming Spidey in the ground, throws him through a wall at one point. Spider-Man is trying everything he can, and he just can't touch the guy. It's just not working. There's no shot at him winning. And this iconic picture for me at the end that wasn't printed in my brain. Black Tarantula standing all tall over Spider-Man. Spider-Man's holding his arm up, his like web kind of over him to make it like a sling. He's holding his shoulder on. He's still talking a little bit because he's Spider-Man, but his internal monologue's like he knows he has no chance. And in that moment, because he's defending this kid and his wife, Tarantula, this massive beast of a villain, just looks at Spider-Man and says, "You know what? You've won the day today. You have won. You alone have survived my wrath." And he lets it go. And he walks away. And I always remember that because technically, Spidey doesn't win. But for some reason, that story resonated with me. This one man standing there, this unstoppable force coming at him. And yet he stood his ground, not because he wanted glory, not because he wanted riches, simply because someone was trying to hurt somebody else, trying to hurt a kid. And Spider Man was not going to let that happen. I remember reading that issue over and over and over again, so much so that the staples got loose and the pages popped down, the cover tore, and all that. I just remember reading it. It was so impactful because while I had read stories like that before as a kid, I'd read the Bible a lot, David and Goliath, and rooting for the underdog, and watched Rocky movies and all these things. It was the first time in a comic book form that I had seen something where I was like, that is impressive. And it just, I didn't really realize why, but it stuck with me. It stuck with me for years. And I remember thinking as I got older, that was the power of comic books. What I learned from that, you don't give up. Insurmountable odds and impossible throw in front of you, you don't give up. Now I could learn that from other sources. I had a father who taught me that, a grandfather who taught me that. I read stories and saw movies and watched sports and saw that stuff. But that visualization, that magic of this character I liked in Spider-Man, in this written form, in the story that you just get captured in for like 10, 15 minutes as a kid, man, that left an imprint on me. And it showed me why comic books matter, why superheroes matter, why we still need superheroes. And it's why when Mike and I get on here, a lot of times we will talk about the problems we see in the comic book universe, the problems that we see with modern comics, the problems that we see with what we're seeing done to heroes. But I think if I have to put it all into to why we do that, why we care, why there's passion, it's not anger at modern creators. It's not anger at Marvel and DC. It's a sense of loss of kids not getting superheroes the way they used to be, the heroes the way they used to be. And I think in some ways, while it's easy to blame the creatives and it's easy to blame the companies, some of that's on us as fans too. And that one of the weird things that happens is when you go back and you look at the history of comic books, while they matured slightly, if you read from the 60s largely to like the 90s, well, some things got a little gritty and grounded and more violent. You were largely still okay to hand a comic book to a kid. They could normally pick up your average issue of Amazing Spider-Man or Batman or X-Men. And yeah, there were times things would touch on it. And sure, there were one-off issues in different series like Moon Knight or Green Lantern, Green that dealt with stuff. But your normal superhero fare on the shelves of the grocery store, and any kid could grab them and read them and get the same experience that I had reading that comic in 1998. Yet I feel like we don't have that anymore. Yeah, there's Dog Man and Captain Underpants and all those things, but those are for small kids. Those like 8 to 10 to 12 years who are reading, who are processing, who are growing, who need examples. And yeah, they probably see them in their real life. But that magic that superheroes can provide, that lesson, those things that you can see from them lived out. Yeah, you'll never be fighting some giant guy like that, but you're gonna face obstacles in life. And I'll be honest, even as a 30 something year old man, I still remember that scene from that comic book. I still remember Spider Man standing his ground. And it just makes me sad for what I think we have with comic books now, because I think what we've done to comics is instead of us trying to be more like the superheroes in those pages, we've tried to make the superheroes too much like us. And I don't mean in relatable ways like Peter Parker struggling with his bills or not being able to get dates. But what we've done is we've decided that we don't want them to be aspirational anymore. We want them to be broken like us. It's kind of where I read stuff now, like Absolute Batman and the Ultimates and some of these comics, and while there's still enjoyment to be found, it's just dragging the heroes to where you no longer really want to be Batman. They've tried to make Batman more like you. And that doesn't resonate the same way. It doesn't lift the characters up. It drags them down to us. And instead of us trying to look at someone like Superman and go, man, I may not have the powers, I may not have the strength, but maybe I can be a good guy like him. Instead, tries to have this really deconstructive way where we look at Superman and go, that's naive and stupid. No one could be like that. And it's just a sad place that we're at because it's starting to feel like with the way comics are struggling, and now we're seeing the comic book movie circle the drain. Are we going to a place where there might be a world where there are no superheroes for kids? I look at the plethora of stuff that was around when I was a kid. X-Men cartoons and Spider-Man cartoons and Batman cartoons, and I look at all those and they're not really there anymore. Yeah, they're on Disney Plus, but we've turned Spider-Man into a PG-13 thing where there's cussing and get people getting stabbed and all that. And that's not a place where a lot of kids are going to be. X-Men 97 got all mature, and yeah, it was still fun, but let's be honest, that was made a lot more for a 30-year-old than it was a 10-year-old. Batman the animated series did a great balance, and now we got Batman Cape Crusader, which is the same thing. It's more for 30-year-olds than it is for 13-year-olds or 10-year-olds. And I think that's the problem. We've decided that these things that used to exist as folklore and legend and stuff that could inspire people and make us want to be better, we've tried to just make it ugly like our world, and it doesn't really work. I remember sitting down a few weeks ago and I was watching the show Andor, and a scene in Andor blew up for all the wrong reasons of people getting polarized and all that. But I remember watching, I think it was the second or third episode, there's an attempted assault scene in there where this Imperial officer tries to take advantage of this woman. And yes, it was gripping and grounding TV, and you rooted for her to get away. And it was a powerful scene. And I'm sure, it's great prestige television. And then it strikes you, this is Star Wars. This is supposed to be about R2-D2, wizards with laser swords, 9-foot Chewbacca's talking and flying through space. And yeah, there were serious stuff in Star Wars, but I think there's a huge difference between a guy dueling with his space wizard father with lightsabers and his hand gets cut off and replaced with a robot arm by the end by his droid friends, and having a scene like what was in Andor. And I think we've just gotten to a place where we've decided that like kids don't get this stuff anymore. We want it to be for us still. And I have to be honest, I'm responsible for that too. There's a ton of content that I enjoy that probably isn't where superheroes should be. As great as I think the Daredevil TV show is, I think it's one of the best television shows ever. Kind of breaks my heart every time my like 3-year-old kid sees these old Daredevil 60s comics that I have. He likes the character and wants toys of Matt Murdock. And yet the best representation of him on screen is something that he's 14 years away from probably watching. It kills me that he's a kid because of me, because I love Wolverine. He's got all these toys, and yet the first comic accurate Wolverine movie where he's got the costume and all of it. The first time Wolverine pulls on the mask, there's immediately a sex joke from Deadpool that's quite crude to poignantly put that scene together. That the Wolverine that he gets from the comic books, he can't really see in live action for another 13 or 14 years because we needed him to behead 40 different versions of Deadpool while making crass sex jokes. And again, I'm not here to condemn people for that. Look, I'm responsible for it. I watch it. I enjoy some of that stuff too. But I think in an effort to make the medium grow with us and in an effort to make the medium more like us, we've lost a lot of what made this special, a lot of what used to make this stuff so poignant for us. I think all of us who are comic book fans, you probably have that first comic that sticks with you. Maybe it was Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. Heck, it doesn't even have to be your favorite character. I love Spider-Man, but he's not my favorite superhero. That issue of that comic, the way that it struck me as a kid and the lessons you learned from it. And yeah, it's kind of lame to learn something from a comic book, sure, but you do nonetheless. And I think that's just sadly where we've gotten because it doesn't seem like the medium's even learning from any of that. We look at those optimistic things now as like, oh, gee whiz kind of thing, like it's the Andy Griffith show or something. Instead, now it's polybagged comics, and red band comics, and black label comics where Batman can say the F bomb and you might get some nudity in there or something. And it's not where superheroes need to be. We still need superheroes, not for us, but for kids. Because most of us found the superheroes when we were kids. And yeah, you can show me old issues, and sure, those are great. They always are. But I do just wish comics would get back to a little bit more because it makes me really sad. That moment that I had as a 10-year-old reading that comic book, what that meant to me, what that did, what that moment was reading that and that lesson, that there's a lot of kids now who may not get that, at least not from superheroes. And this medium still has the potential to do that. It still can. It just, I think, needs to remember it's a lot more about inspiring people to be more like these aspirational heroes, to make you see Superman and go, man, I could be more like that. Instead of going, well, I need to see someone who has all the flaws and problems that I have, and they can't really be great because that wouldn't happen if a normal person had powers. That's never been the point. The point is you're supposed to want to be more like Superman. You'll know you'll never be him. You know you'll never be Spider-Man. But you can try. You can try to be better. And I just wish comics would get back to a little bit more of that place so that a lot more kids could sit down and read that first comic and take that lesson away and go, man, that's really cool. I want to be like that when I get older. Because the medium still has the potential to do that. But just one man's opinion. Let me know. What do you guys think down below? Do you think comics have gotten too far away from their roots? And like me, did you have a first comic that hit you that same way? Did you have a first comic that made you sit down and go, wow, I want to be more like that? As always, folks, whether you agree or disagree, thank you so much for watching. God bless you. Catch you in our next video.